John, you are live.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate everybody being here today. Thanks so much for taking time out of your schedules to tune in. I'm John Perry, Regional Vice President of Coldwell Banker, Pittsburgh. I want to thank you for being here with us today. This is our second of our editions of our real estate Q&A during COVID-19. Going to try to do our best to answer some of your questions, give you some updates as to what's happening in the market, and in general, just kind of give you an update as to what you might expect if you are thinking about buying or selling a house, or if you happen to be a real estate professional right now navigating what we have going on. So Brian, why don't you go to the next slide? So for today, just real quickly, I'll introduce the team of people that I have on here with me to help answer additional questions that you might have during our session. We'll take a look at what the current market conditions are and what we are and aren't able to do right now. We'll take a quick look forward, and then more importantly, I'll open things up and let you guys ask some questions, and I will do my best to answer those. If you want to, right now, you can start putting questions into the question box. So go ahead and start lining your questions up, or as things come about, as I'm talking about things, you can feel free to add those throughout, and Brian will be moderating for me and trying to get through those questions. If we don't get to every question in the chat, please know that we'll do our best to try to reach back out to you. If you're logged in as somebody anonymous or out there, make sure you reach out to your agent or somebody who invited you to try to make sure you get your question answered. If they can't answer it, they'll level it up to us, and we'll do our best to make sure you get those answered to the best of our ability. Go ahead to the next slide, Brian. I'm really excited that once again I have Kevin Dilday, who's our regional manager of Guaranteed Rate Affinity, our mortgage partner, on with us today, as well as our sales manager for Keystone Closing Services, our local title company, who's our partner. These guys are both super knowledgeable in their aspects of the business as well, and definitely do an unbelievable job in trying to answer questions. So if there's things that come up that are mortgage related or title related, you may hear me hand things over to one of these two guys. So gentlemen, thanks for being on here with us today as well. Go ahead to the next slide, Brian. We'll jump into what we're going to talk about with current conditions. As always, with everything that is happening, we continue to want to make sure that you understand that safety is still our #1 concern. We are reopening, we're getting back to business, and that is super exciting for everybody involved, not only the people that want to buy and sell houses, but also our trusted advisors, our agents that are super excited to be back with those clients. We just want to make sure we're doing it safely. The governor has been very clear that if we have a revision to status of a high climbing number of cases, now that we're opening things back up, that they will revert us back to a different state, and that could change our ability to be able to function in the real estate realm. And we don't want to see that, so we're just trying to ask everybody to continue to use the best practices possible. You're going to hear a lot of noise and misconceptions from a lot of different people. Please understand, I said this 2 weeks ago, I'll say it again now today. Please make sure you're working with a trusted advisor that does know what's going on, that is getting direction, and it is following guidelines that are put out not only by us at Coldwell Banker, but more importantly, as well as the state of Pennsylvania, and following those guidelines to make sure that everybody is operating safely. Some of the rules and regulations have changed as recently as yesterday afternoon. The governor finally put out an order that no matter what color phase for right now, the county that somebody is in, no matter what color phase it is, whether it's yellow, red, or green, real estate is now deemed an activity that everybody can practice and do it safely. So that is a great piece of news. We are super excited to be able to get back with that. Now, some of the rules have changed around that. I'll touch on those in just a moment when we go to the next slide. But what I want you to understand is transactions are still moving forward. They, matter of fact, have always been moving forward for us, even before we went into a yellow phase and even before the edict yesterday that changed some of the operating procedures that we've been under. Because we've had great partners like Guaranteed Rate Affinity and like Keystone Closing, who have put themselves in a position to be able to operate completely and solely remotely or with very minimal exposure to clients, we have been able to continue to move transactions forward, and we're going to continue to do that. What I would tell you is that change has been constant for us. Yesterday, we got an update out of the blue, changing what our parameters were for operations in the state of Pennsylvania, and had no idea that that was even coming for us. So therefore, what I would tell you to do is please stay in touch with your agent, your trusted advisor, to let them be giving you updates as things change. Just because you hear what we're announcing today doesn't mean it's going to be the same exact thing tomorrow, the next week, or a month from now. So please stay in touch with your people, especially if you find yourself in a circumstance where you may be considering buying or selling a house in the near future. Just because you're not ready right now, I would be in touch with your people who you plan to work with on a very regular basis to be keeping an eye on not only what's going on in the market right now, but also what that's going to mean for you for whatever regulations you need to follow, and maybe even possibly thinking through your timeline more adequately as you move forward. Go ahead to the next slide, Brian. Some of the major guidelines that changed just as of yesterday. The first one was you're now allowed to have an agent plus 2 people. Previously, the guidelines were only 2 total people in the house. So it was either an agent and one of the people, or the 2 people without their agent. They have changed the guidelines. Our Pennsylvania Association of Realtors fought very, very hard alongside of us as a brokerage to make sure that we had the ability for our agents to be with their clients in the house, obviously practicing safe distancing and using safety equipment to keep everybody safe during it. But the really good news is now an agent and 2 people can go in. Now, we get questions on a regular basis. What happens if we have kids that are with us for the showing? I understand in most cases, a lot of people are trying to leave them out of the showing. If you have children with you, it does not matter. It's still limited to the agent and 2 people to go on the property. So if children must view the property, think your timeline through adequately to understand that it'll be the agent and 1 parent and a child, and then maybe rotating a parent and another child to be able to go into the property. We recognize that this does not mean that it's going to be the most convenient way to go about showing houses, but fortunately we've been given some lifting of the restrictions on what we can do, and we're just going to ask that you continue to abide by those rules. Please don't ask your agents if it's okay if we just sneak an extra person, and don't put them in a position to jeopardize their professional licenses, because that can happen and suspensions of license can be given out if they're not following the guidelines. So please follow those. All of the CDC guidelines are being recommended to be followed while in properties. So face masks must be worn by everyone at all times, fully covering the nose and mouth area of the person. It can't be down around the chin. It must cover the nose and the mouth fully in order to be on and operating properly. You no longer have to wear booties or foot coverings, and you no longer have to wear gloves in the house. Now, it's highly recommended that you make sure that you bring some wipes or hand sanitizer with you to continue to do so. If you're on the listing side of things, there are certain preparations that we would recommend that you make going into having a showing at your property. I would recommend that you turn all of your lights on in the property prior to somebody going in. I'd recommend that you open all the bedroom doors. If they don't stay open on their own, find something to prop them open. Even opening closet doors, or at least cracking them open so that door handles don't need to be touched on a regular basis, will save the ability for everybody to have to touch multiple surfaces. In this instance, if all of the doors were open and the lights were on throughout the property, during a showing, the only person that would need to touch anything would be the agent taking buyers into the property to touch the lockbox, retrieve the key, and use the door handle of the front door to go in and out of the property. Otherwise, there would be no other need for anyone to touch any surfaces in the property. This is our best practice guideline that we're going to recommend for all people going through properties right now. So if you're a seller, take the proper precautions. If you're a buyer and those doors are open and the lights are on, leave them open and leave the lights on, because there may very well be other showings on after you. And this will continue to allow us to have the ability to have the houses shown completely and totally safely. A question that we've gotten often is, who can do what during this process? Can appraisers go out to the home? Can inspectors go out to the home? PAR has already addressed this once on their Facebook Live event yesterday, and the feeling around all of these different people, whether it be closing officers, mortgage people, appraisers, and home inspectors, is that they're all following under the same guidelines. So if you have a house that goes under agreement, and you're the buyer and you want to go into that property with the inspector and your agent is there, just please keep in mind that it would only be the agent, the home inspector, and one of the two buyers if there are multiple buyers involved. That is what the limit of the people in the house has to be. So just keep that in mind as you're moving forward with all the things that we're trying to do to keep people safe with what we're doing. Now, if you go to the next slide, Brian, we're still not back to business as usual. We would love for it to be, showing houses as easy as it was prior to COVID-19 and listing houses. However, if you plan ahead and you show some patience, you're going to come out with the better expectations. So what I would just try to tell you to do is set the expectations in your own mind of understanding that calling an hour before you want to see a house is probably not a best practice, and it's probably not going to be able to be something that can be accommodated. You're going to need to plan a little bit further and ahead to make sure that you know what the schedule is and that you have the ability to get into that house and give the sellers time to get out of there. Another thing that I would highly recommend that you do is continue, as I said before, to listen to your trusted advisors. They're in contact with us as a brokerage on a regular basis, our leadership, our legal team, and the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors gathering information to make sure that they keep you safe and help you through this transaction. Make sure you're touching base with them all the time, as often as you can. Now that we're in the yellow phase, now that real estate is opened back up the way that it was yesterday and lifting some of those restrictions, the question has come up, should we still use a COVID-19 addendum because activities are still allowed to be moving forward? Our recommendation as a best practice is that yes, you continue to use a COVID-19 addendum on all of your contracts to protect everyone involved, because there still may be certain circumstances where some businesses that support the transaction to try to get it to closing aren't able to get it all the way to closing without some sort of a delay. This will protect the people involved by allowing that extension to be given. And if you don't know what that is, please talk to your agent and they'll explain it to you. Listen, the last thing I'll leave you on before we jump into our questions and answers is this. The market has been heating up just since last Friday when we were able in our area to go into a yellow phase. We've seen an incredible amount of traffic in our area. A lot of buyers out looking at homes, a lot of listings coming onto the market. We know that that's super exciting. Many of those listings are selling with multiple offers on them and seeing buyers really excited to be able to see houses again. This brings us a lot of opportunities. So again, if you've been sitting on the sideline waiting to see what was going to happen, I would tell you it's time to have that conversation with your agent and your trusted advisor to make sure that they understand that you're thinking about listing or selling your house, because right now may be an unbelievable time for you to list or buy, and the opportunities could be there for you. So again, thanks so much for being here and letting me give you that brief update. And if I can now, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to try to go through some of the questions with us. So if you have additional questions, please put them in the question area, and I will make sure that I try to do my best to answer all of them to the best of my ability.
All right, John, so we do have a few questions so far.
Great.
The first one is, have you been seeing a lot of buyers, or is it mostly just people eager to list their homes?
It's been a lot of both. It's been a lot of both. I think a lot of people were, cautious and cautious for a reason during this whole thing, wanting to see what it was going to be like when real estate would be deemed as a necessity in Pennsylvania. And given that we've been given that go ahead to move forward again to help people, we're seeing buyers and sellers coming out and talking to their agents, trusting those people that they've been talking to throughout this process and getting really ready to put their house on the market. We had many people that were lined up ready to go. We had certain circumstances where people had taken pictures of the house and chose not to put it on the market, even though that they had the professional photography and everything done ready to go back in March. They waited and they chose to list right now, and they've really experienced some great circumstances around those listings. Buyers obviously are experiencing great things as well. Our interest rates are incredible right now. On top of that, they're seeing new inventory come on the market that hasn't been there for months. So buyers are taking advantage of it as well. Sellers are able to list and sell their houses again, and it's a very exciting time for everybody involved on the real estate transactions in Pennsylvania. So I'd encourage you that if you're thinking about doing that, have that conversation with your trusted advisor, seek out that agent. If you don't have one, let us know. We'll try to connect you to one. But if you don't have an agent that you're ready to talk to, you should really be having that conversation to lay out your game plan and your timeline. Let me give you an example. Right now, we had all the people that went under agreement prior to the shutdown that weren't able to fully complete a transaction. They're now completing their transactions. We're also seeing that new business is coming onto the books. So things like appraisals and home inspections are very, very in high demand, very much in high demand on getting booked right now. So what we're finding is that it might take a little bit longer in time to get under agreement and work all the way till closing. So the likelihood of a 25 or 30 day closing may not be the most adequate. It might look something like 35 or 40 days right now. It's still negotiable between the buyer and the seller, as long as all the partners involved can get the transaction completed in time. You can follow whatever timeline you want. But what I would say is having that conversation with your trusted advisor about making sure that you understand that timeline before you enter into something is very paramount at this moment.
Okay, John, next question is, this individual would like a brief explanation of the new paperwork.
Yeah, so here's the deal. I could give you a brief explanation as to what we were doing yesterday. That has changed, and PAR is changing the paperwork again. So as I said a little bit earlier, change is constant for us right now. We're still waiting on PAR to give us a new set of guidelines and an update to the 2 COVID-19 showing forms, which were the PAN form and the HSA form. One was a health screening, one was a property notification. So those forms are being updated as we speak at the moment by the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. When we have them, we'll get those out to our agents. I'm sure we're going to be having meetings with our legal counsel to talk to our agents about those updates to the forms. As of right now, the standard was that every single person within 24 hours of seeing a house must sign the HSA form, and a PAN form needed to be signed for every single listing. It appears that they're going to make some adjustments to that. I would not want to speak to it right now because I don't know all the adjustments that they're going to make, and we're hopeful that the adjustments that they're going to make are going to lessen the requirements of how frequently those forms need to be done. But please stand by for a full briefing on that once we're able to give that update, once we've seen and reviewed those forms ourselves.
Okay, John, I believe that you covered this during your brief, but just to make sure we go over it again, this individual understood that the only required covering now when you go visit a property is a mask, that booties and gloves are necessary but voluntary. Can you please confirm that, as well as 3 people in the house?
Yeah, so a face mask is required the entire time by all parties, along with using CDC social distancing guidelines. So obviously stay 6 feet apart to the best of your ability. You know, have people wait on the sidewalk while you open the door, 6 feet away, open the door, go ahead in, let the buyers come in, keep that social distancing, and it is a maximum of 3 total people. The guideline specifically reads an agent and 2 other people. The reason why the agent became so important is because of liability issues of letting people wander through houses with no professional guiding them through that property. So the guideline was changed to specifically be an agent and 2 other people. That doesn't mean you can let mom and dad and a kid go through the house without you. The guideline is an agent and 2 people at a time. So I hope that clarifies that.
All right, John, do you see the real estate market taking a hit with the unemployment rate being so high right now?
Well, first of all, for all the people that may be out of jobs right now, our hearts go out to them. We definitely think about them and hope that their businesses and their industries are able to be reopened, and those jobs will come back shortly. We don't believe there's going to be a long-term impact on this, and the reason being is we don't think that this isn't a housing crisis. This is a financial crisis caused by a health issue. So the recovery that we're looking at, even though we see that there may be instances where some unemployment stops some people from being able to purchase a home, on a whole scale, it's probably not going to be that case. Our partners like GRA, and Kevin had talked about this last week, is they're still even able to do pre-approvals for people that are on furloughs, and knowing that they're going to have to do a full verification of employment. Once that is done and once they're back to work and they can complete the transaction again, we would just talk through understanding what the timeline of a contract like that looks like if you have a buyer that is on furlough right now. So we don't believe that there's going to be a long-term impact on the housing market based on unemployment right now, but we do believe that there will be maybe some initial downturn for some people, and we may even have some unfortunate circumstances where people have to sell because of the loss of employment that they may be suffering right now. And obviously we don't like to see that. And again, our hearts go out to those people, but we don't believe it's going to be a wholesale downturn in the real estate market.
So here's another good question. Have there been a lot of bidding wars on listings?
Yeah, and as always, what I would tell you, and I'm sure that all of your trusted advisor agents that are on this call or that you'll be talking to would agree with me, and that is, in the market that we're in right now, with a general lower inventory of homes, when a house is priced properly, there typically is a high volume of traffic and a great possibility to see multiple offers on that home. It's an entire pricing strategy that you as a seller can employ through the advice with your trusted advisor. It's something that I would always recommend, that you actually look for the most advantageous situation for you as a seller, which is that situation that allows you to be in the driver's seat of making sure that you're in control of the situation. When there's multiple offers, you have your choice of which offer is best. So talk to your trusted advisor about where to position that house. And houses that are positioned that way right now, we are seeing many of them sell within days with multiple offers. So yes.
Great, John. Any updates on new forms, HSA, PAN, and what is HSA and PAN?
Yeah, so the HSA is the health screening addendum that I talked about before, and the PAN is the property notification addendum for COVID-19 that we are in the process. PAR, again, as I'd said earlier, please keep in mind that PAR is reworking those forms right now as we speak. The updates to that, again, there have been a bunch of theories, and that's why I said earlier, there's a lot of noise and a lot of theories out there. But until we get a directive from the legal counsels from those organizations, I choose to follow the former directives. And that's exactly what the guidelines that we would tell all of our agents, which is until we actually have new forms or new guidelines, the guidelines remain the same from before, which means every buyer going into a property must sign that within a 24-hour notice, and so does the seller. Now, we believe that's going to change, but we don't know the framework in which it's going to change yet, and we're hoping to have that maybe possibly as early as later today or tomorrow from the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors.
Okay, so here's one that just came in. What are the office rules during COVID-19?
Office rules have not changed during the yellow phase. That is one thing. Real estate activity is allowed to return in the state of Pennsylvania, but our offices are not open to the public. You as an agent, if you're an agent on here, agents can come into the office to retrieve items, to prepare paperwork, to pick up lock boxes, to do those things. But we're no longer allowed, still no longer allowed to congregate in groups and spending entire times in there. When you're in there, you must practice all of the safe CDC guidelines. You must wear a mask. You must do the things that you're doing to keep everybody safe in order to make sure that we're following those things. We have notices posted all over all of our offices to help everyone make good choices. We even have a health screening question on the outside of our buildings asking to make sure people don't enter if they've had symptoms that are consistent with COVID-19 at this point in time.
Okay, here's a question. Agents and brokers, they're just saying need to be on the same page. So with the addendums, the COVID-19 addendum, is that still something that's being used now?
Absolutely.
What does that do?
So the COVID-19 addendum is a two-part addendum that is a part of a sales agreement. So the COVID-19 addendum on the top of the form puts it into agreement and makes it part of your agreement that the buyer and seller agree that during a pandemic like COVID-19, one of the parties on the bottom half of that form can unilaterally extend all timeframes in the contract by giving written notice that they cannot complete their part of the transaction within the originally negotiated timeframes due to something that arose from COVID-19. So it's a two-part form that allows for a unilateral extension of time for all timeframes in the contract to allow things to remain under agreement, fully intact and moving forward with an extension of time. The standard for the form without changing the time frame is a 30-day extension. It can be shortened and it can be lengthened through negotiations, but that's what the COVID-19 addendum does.
Okay, how are you advising your agents to handle the various forms in regards to going to see a house? Do they have to do them every single time? Is it once time, or what is the recommendation and best practice?
Right now, the recommendation is every time a property is shown, the forms must be used. Again, I can't reiterate enough. When we get new guidance on this, which we expect to get very soon, those guidelines may change. But as of right now, it is Coldwell Banker's stance, along with the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, that those forms should be used in every instance. Again, they're working on it at the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, and our legal team will review those documents the moment we have them to make sure that we're all on the same page and understand what those changes might look like moving forward.
What are the rules with regards to sanitizing now that we're not wearing gloves anymore?
That's why I do recommend that you give wipes and or take hand sanitizer with you. Please keep in mind also, as I had talked about, if the house is properly prepared for the showing, all doors are open on the interior of the property and all interior lights are on in the property, then there's only one door handle that'll be touched, and that'll be done by the buyer's agent. So if the buyer's agent is prepared with wipes and or hand sanitizer, or both in this case, they would open the lockbox, retrieve the key, open the front door by unlocking it and touching the door handle there. But once inside, using safe guidelines, the buyers nor the agent would have to touch anything because all lights are on and all doors will be open. In that case, there would be no need for sanitizing any surfaces because no surfaces would have been touched by anybody in the property. So that is the best and safest guideline. Upon leaving the property, the agent that showed the property should wipe down the door handles and replace the key and leave the property as it was found with lights on and doors open. Whether there's another showing or not, the sellers can then go home, close their doors, and turn off their lights, thus only being the people that touched the doorknobs in the first place and afterwards. Obviously, as anything, we'd highly recommend that you continue to follow your own safe guidelines under your own legal counsel as well on showing your property and sanitizing things before and after showings.
What kind of tax breaks can someone working from home now expect? Can't you write off a portion of your house?
That is a question for a CPA, and unfortunately, we do not have any of them on the call here today. So my best recommendation for you there would be reach out to your tax professional, your CPA, and ask them about the question of what can be done on a tax advantage for anything that may be eligible to you there. But unfortunately, myself or any of my guests on here today are not tax professionals and cannot answer that question for you.
How has the current situation affected people's ability to get a mortgage?
Kevin, you want to unmute yourself? I think that'd be a great question for you to answer on has it affected anybody to get a mortgage, and I think you'll all be pleasantly surprised at this answer that Kevin will give.
Yeah, perfect, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Hey, excellent. So first of all, thanks for having me, John. We appreciate it. And John brought this up earlier. So even people that may be furloughed right now, we are still moving forward with doing a full pre-approval on them. So even if you've got someone who's out of work, we can go ahead and do a full pre-approval, get them qualified. They would have to return to work and at least receive their first pay stub before we could clear the loan to close at that point. But we can go ahead and get everything ready on that end. In terms of qualifications, There are lenders out there that have substantially changed their guidelines, added overlays, increased credit scores. I can only speak for guaranteed rate, but from our perspective, we are direct to Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie, and we have not added any overlays to our guidelines. We have not changed any credit score or debt ratio requirements, with the exception of FHA. For FHA, we did move to a 620 minimum score. Most lenders I've heard have moved up to either 660 or 680, but we are at 620 on FHA. But outside of that one credit score change, we have not had any other changes to our guidelines. So it is very much as close to business as usual as possible on the mortgage side. And one piece I did want to mention, this came up on last week's call, a question about it, and we did get additional guidance from both Fannie and Freddie just earlier this afternoon. So I do want to clarify, for someone that has been in a forbearance, we can move forward with providing a new mortgage for someone that has been in forbearance. There's not a 12-month waiting period. I saw some emails going around over the past week stating that there was going to be a 12-month waiting period, but that is not the case. And again, can't speak for all lenders, but at least for us, we are following Fannie and Freddie's guidance that if someone is or has been in a forbearance, that forbearance has to be caught up, and that piece of it has to be paid off. But once that is done, we can move forward with new financing for them without a 12-month wait. So that's where we stand as of right now, John.
Great. And Jim, Kevin, you want to touch real quickly on just the status of rates right now? I know they've been pretty incredible. A lot of people have had questions about where interest rates are or where they might go. Any guidance or thoughts on that? That's something that I've heard from agents and clients alike.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a great time to continue to move forward with the mortgage. Rates remain historically low. For a 30-year fixed rate conforming, today you're going to be somewhere around 3.25. If you're on a 15-year, you're probably somewhere 2.625 or 2.75, and VA is extremely low as well, also around 2.75. Now those rates can and do change by the hour or by the day, so always make sure you check with your mortgage professional on the most up-to-date rates. And my usual caveat, we do need to pull credit and get a full approval to qualify someone, but that's certainly a general range. And I do want to mention too, something you talked about earlier, John. I think it's an important point. Certainly our hearts go out as well to anyone who's been impacted negatively during this time and they're not able to qualify for a mortgage right now. But our chief economist certainly also believes that there's going to be a lot of people now in the purchase market that were not planning to be in the purchase market before. As he said, that people have gone out and added dogs to their family. Shelter rescues are at an all-time high. People have gotten tired of staring at the same four walls they've been looking at. People have realized that they need a work from home space when something like this arises. So we believe there will be a lot of buyers in the market that were not planning to be in the market before the pandemic, and those numbers will actually more than offset the number of buyers that are negatively impacted and not able to purchase at the current moment.
Absolutely. All right, thanks, Kevin, so much. And I would echo that sentiment that is exactly what we're seeing as well. I'd even said about 6 weeks ago, you're going to have a lot of people that realize that being stuck in their house for 2 months, at that point when they were stuck in their house for 2 months, is the things that they've overlooked for a long period of time when they weren't spending all day long every day in that house. That 2 months stuck in that house made all the things that they may want to change about it, or they may want to change in general, come to full light. So that'll give opportunities to buyers to buy those houses, for them to move up to those houses, and for those buyers to continue to sell those properties and move up to new ones. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity coming our way for both consumers and just in the real estate industry in general.
Okay, so the next question is probably going to be going to Jim Bolger, but basically is how has this changed how you do closings? Can agents come to closings? And if agents and sellers and buyers can all be there, why can an agent only have 3 people at a house at a time if they're doing that?
Yep, I will definitely turn that one over to Jim Bolger from Keystone Closing. So Jim, you want to answer that question? That'd be great.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's one of those things that, constantly changing, misconceptions, that sort of thing. Let's start with that. So, the question asks, why can agents and all buyers and sellers attend a closing, but agents can only have 3 people in a home at a time? What the guidance said is that, an agent can now attend a closing, where in the past it limited the number of people to closings, but it also says that all CDC guidelines for safe social distancing must be followed. So a lot of times we close in small conference rooms, very nice conference rooms with great technology in them, but they're small. That may still not allow for the opportunity to have all those people in a conference room at one time and still be safe. So we're probably going to find where it's still a lot of business as usual, the new usual that we've been doing, where we're still going to sign sellers ahead of time and possibly even remotely if necessary. If we can do a remote online notarization and closing with our lending partner, we will. If it's going to be a standard closing, we're probably still going to have the buyers only attend. If the agent is going to come to the office, to do something, and they want to be, out of the room so that we're not crowding a conference room, that would be fine. They could, help themselves by, getting some prospecting done, doing some paperwork, things like that, and then, congratulate their buyers and take them and exchange keys and things like that off, as before. We're still not going to see the return to how we've done things in the past, with a conference room, filled with, 7, 8, 10 people, because that's just not, a good practice at the present time, and certainly would not be something that would follow CDC and state health department guidelines. And we certainly wouldn't want someone to come by and seeing something like that and, cause an issue where someone might lose their license or be reprimanded by the Department of Health or some of that lines. Your best bet, talk to your professional that's going to be doing the closing. Ask them, what are we going to do? We're going to communicate ahead of time what our expectations are. We know how many people need to actually sign something. Those are the people that are going to be there. We're going to, make sure that we communicate clearly about what our expectations are. And we've been doing this all along since this started. So it's not anything new to us. We've been sanitizing our conference rooms ahead of time. We've been preparing them ahead of time and making sure that we space out our closings enough. So it's not something that we're going to see changing. And we're ready and able to do that.
Great, thanks, Jim.
Okay, so the next question, are there any benefits of buying a home during a pandemic? Can you find a better deal?
Possibly. I don't think it's any different than any time in any part of the history of the housing market. There's always going to be, great opportunities at any given moment. I think there just might be more opportunities right now. So what I would be saying to you is, that's a quantitative question, not a qualitative question. So what I would say is there may be more quantities of opportunities that arise to you, and so you might feel like you get a better deal. I don't know how you would define a better deal, but what I would say is there are definitely going to be great opportunities for a lot of people, both buyers and sellers, right now, to take advantage of this market, given that there's a lot of pent-up energy around the housing market, given that we were shut down for 2 months. So I'd look for opportunities coming out of this, not necessarily, some things that are on the negative side. However, there could be some circumstances where some people may have such a severe negative impact on their lives based on what's going on that they may be forced to sell. I hate to look at that as a deal, but as more of a opportunity there for helping them escape one reality to be able to help them get into another reality at the same time. But those things may arise given what's going on in the country.
Okay, have you heard of any first-time buyer credits from the government to help stimulate the market?
I have not. Kevin, do you want to confirm or deny anything you guys have heard on the mortgage end of things for that?
No, John, as of right now, we haven't had anything on any type of special first-time home buyer credits that's been put out there as of right now.
Yep.
But I will echo your sentiments that, hey, this is a fantastic time to buy in the sense that, at least for us, at Guaranteed Rate, our guidelines have not tightened up any, so we're still lending full force. And with the rates being historically low, that's where you're really going to save money over the course of a 30-year mortgage when the rate is substantially low like it is right now.
All right, John, we got a few questions in here specifically about vacant homes. Should you have signs in there requesting that the buyer agent sanitizes things? What's the best practice? Should the listing agent go to the house first or the buyer agent show up early? What are the best practices around vacant homes?
I think you need to talk to your clients, the owners of the property. They need to be the ones dictating what you're doing with that home. I know for me, if I had a listing and I was the listing agent, I would talk to my clients, and I'm not sure that I would rely on anyone, especially from other places, that I couldn't control their actions to make sure that they're doing the things that need to be done, in which case I would probably take those things on myself. I would be making sure that the property is sanitized by contacting the sellers. It is their property and it is their responsibility. So talk to your clients, work out the reasoning behind what you're going to do, and allow them to make the decision as to how they're going to handle it. Even though the house is vacant, in many cases the sellers are still in the area. They are still responsible for that house. If the house caught on fire, the seller would still be responsible for the house. It's no real difference here. They need to still take responsibility for their own home, even if they aren't living in it.
Okay, next is how or who is enforcing realtors and clients and everyone else to follow these protocols, wearing masks and all that stuff?
So it's the state at this point in time is mandating this, and the states are the ones that, they're the ones that hold the professional board. So if somebody is going to get in trouble as far as their licensure goes for not following these guidelines, there's a plethora of reasons and people that could turn somebody in for a bunch of different things. But I can tell you it's the state regulations that mandate professional licenses that are going to be the ones that come down on people whenever it is that they get themselves into a situation where they have to turn in. And the burden of proof will be on that person that is brought up for questioning to the professional board in Pennsylvania.
What are the advantages of using the COVID-19 addendum versus just a simple change in terms?
It's unilateral. So what that means is only one party has to sign it to enact the extension. A change of terms addendum must be signed by all parties involved. So if one party doesn't agree to an extension, it doesn't have to be granted on a change of terms addendum. With the COVID-19 form, it allows for unilateral extension of the time frame based on a delay due to COVID-19. So if the buyer has a furlough because business has been further shut down and they can't complete the mortgage, they have the ability to extend that when they're going to go back to work. As Kevin had talked about earlier, we get one paycheck, we do a re-verification of employment, then they're able to go to closing. So the unilateral ability for them to extend the contract and not lose what everybody has worked hard to try to get that transaction to go to closing on is really the benefit of using a COVID-19 addendum.
What advice would you have for a buyer who is maybe concerned about getting out there at this time during this COVID-19, during the yellow phase?
It would depend on what you were concerned about. If you were concerned about health issues, I'd consult a doctor. If you're concerned about legal issues, I would consult an attorney. If you're concerned about what it's going to look like in the marketplace, consult your trusted advisor as an agent. But listen, like the number one thing I can tell you is you got to ask the right type of a professional to get the right type of professional advice. Your real estate agent can't give you health advice. We're not doctors. We can't give you mortgage advice. That's why I have a mortgage professional on the call here. Can't give you closing advice. That's why I have a title professional on the call here. So have conversations with the right type of professionals to make sure you have your questions answered, you understand the risks involved, and then you can make a well-informed decision. Informed decisions are always better than uninformed decisions. So putting yourself in a position to make the best and most informed decision is the best advice I can give you for anybody in any transaction during any time.
How are you advising agents with regards to other brokerages or agents that will not use the various PAN and HSA forms?
I can only control our brokerage and what we advise our agents. So follow our guidelines, and that's the best advice I can give you. We can't control those on the outside. I would do what I need to do to make sure that my clients and myself are protected. And if somebody else does not want to comply, I would get it in writing, make sure that they understand that they're not complying with the guidelines set forth, and then make a decision, again, another informed decision, whether or not the people want to move forward. Let me give you an example. If a seller represented by another broker refused to give an update as to whether or not somebody in the household had been sick, and the buyer doesn't know whether that person can answer those questions openly that nobody has had any symptoms within a certain time period leading up to that showing, the buyer may want to consult somebody or choose not to see that house based on incomplete information. That's, like I said earlier, having the most informed decision that you can make is the best way to make any decision, period.
And with that, oh wait, we just had a new one come in, so maybe I've got one more.
Okay, we'll do one more question, right?
Other brokers are not requiring the forms. How do we handle a situation when they don't send back the fully executed form?
Well, again, if you've done your side and you don't have the full information back to understand what's happening on the other side, you need to advise your clients that you don't have the information back. If they so choose to want to move forward without having that information, that's on them. They should probably seek their own legal counsel advice to do that. But we can't force the other side to sign anything ever. We can only request that it be signed. So if they don't want to comply, then the clients have the choice to no longer move forward and see the property, or choose to, under their own guidance of their own legal or health concerns being represented by the proper professionals, choose to still move forward without having that information back. Now we're done with the end of questions. I just wanted to wrap up and say thanks again for taking the time to be here. We at Coldwell Banker want to thank you for all that you're doing in your communities to help one another, and all that you're doing to help one another stay safe. Please continue to follow those guidelines. Please reach out to us if there's anything that we can continue to do. If you're thinking about selling a house, we would love to have one of our agents sit down and talk to you. If you want to buy a home, it's a fantastic time to do so with really great interest rates and a lot of inventory coming onto the market. We'd love to have that conversation with you as well. I know that our partners and our professionals that are on today would love nothing more than for the whole team to be able to support you through this transaction. So if there's anything that myself, Guaranteed Rate Affinity, or Keystone Closing can do, please know that we're all here to support you and your business moving forward. I want to thank you for taking the time to ask your questions. I hope that we answer them for you, and please be on the lookout for future events where we can do the same for you. From everybody at Coldwell Banker, I want to ask you to stay safe and be well. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.